The crimson warning lights bathed Commander Vex Hollister's weathered face as she stared at the tactical display, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged animal. The massive alien construct filled the view screen, a twisted spire of obsidian metal and pulsing energy veins that stretched for kilometers, its surface crackling with power that could crack worlds in half. "Ma'am, we're reading energy signatures unlike anything in our database," reported Lieutenant Caney Torek from his station, his voice barely steady. "That thing, it's drawing power from stellar radiation, converting it into some kind of focused gravitational weapon." The hegemony had finally shown their hand. After 3 years of brutal war across 17 star systems, they'd grown tired of humanity's stubborn resistance. The Planet Killer, designation unknown, threat level absolute, had emerged from hyperspace just beyond Neptune's orbit 12 hours ago. Its arrival preceded by a simple message broadcast across all human frequencies: submit or be extinguished. Hollister's fingers traced the scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, a reminder of the siege of Proxima, where she'd lost half her fleet and most of her faith in conventional warfare. Around her, the bridge crew of the UES Defiance worked with desperate efficiency, their faces illuminated by the glow of frantically updating displays showing Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet, 300 ships that might as well be insects against a hurricane. "Admiral Cathan's flagship is hailing us," announced Communications Officer Lyra Vonacht, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the grizzled features of Admiral Drix Cathan aboard, the massive dreadnought Terra's Wrath. Behind him, the bridge buzzed with activity as officers coordinated what everyone knew was likely humanity's final stand. "All ships, this is Admiral Cathan. Our Xenobiological Division has confirmed the weapon's operational parameters. That monstrosity is preparing to fire a controlled gravitational pulse that will destabilize Earth's core. We have approximately 36 hours before it reaches full charge." His eyes swept across the assembled fleet commanders. "Every simulation shows the same result. Direct assault has a 0.3% success probability." Hollister felt the weight of those. Words settled on her shoulders like lead. Behind her, she heard Torek curse under his breath, while Vonacht's hands trembled as she maintained the communication array. 300 ships, humanity's finest, all of it meaningless against alien technology that treated the laws of physics like gentle suggestions. "However," Cathan continued, his voice hardening with resolve, "we have one asset they don't know about. Dr. Marilyn Quicks aboard the research vessel Prometheus has been developing something unconventional. Her project was classified beyond most of our clearance levels, but desperate times call for desperate measures." The display shifted to show a smaller ship tucked between 2 destroyer escorts, sleek, experimental, its hull covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Hollister had heard whispers about Quicks's work, rumors of experiments that pushed the boundaries of human understanding, research that made even hardened military scientists uncomfortable. "Dr. Quicks," Cathan's voice carried across the comm, "the floor is yours." The image changed again, revealing a woman whose wild silver hair seemed to defy gravity itself, her eyes bright with the kind of intensity that bordered on madness. "Commanders, what I'm about to propose will sound impossible, perhaps even insane, but impossibility is just another word for a problem we haven't solved yet. Dr. Marilyn Quicks's laboratory aboard the Prometheus looked like the fevered dream of a mad scientist, crossed with an alien artifact. Holographic equations floated in 3-dimensional space, their symbols shifting and morphing as quantum processors calculated probabilities that would have driven lesser minds to despair. At the center of it all sat a device no larger than a briefcase, its surface a maze of crystalline conduits and neural interfaces that pulsed with their own inner light. "You want to do what?" Admiral Cathan's voice crackled through the comm, his disbelief evident even through the static-filled transmission. Quix brushed a strand of silver hair from her face, her fingers dancing across holographic controls with practiced precision. Consciousness translation, Admiral. Not uploading, not copying. True translation of human awareness into quantum substrate. The hegemony built their weapon to destroy matter, but consciousness exists in the spaces between atoms, in the quantum foam itself. Commander Hollister leaned forward in her chair aboard the Defiance, studying the data streams Quix was transmitting. The mathematics were elegant and terrifying in equal measure, describing processes that redefined what it meant to be human. Doctor, even if this works, you're talking about converting someone into... What exactly? Pure information, Quix replied, her eyes gleaming with dangerous excitement. A thinking pattern capable of existing within any sufficiently complex system. Imagine consciousness without the limitations of flesh, able to interface directly with technology, to process data at quantum speeds. She paused, her expression sobering. But the process is irreversible. Whoever volunteers won't be coming back in any recognizable form. The silence that followed stretched across the fleet communication channels like a held breath. Around Hollister, her bridge crew exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the impossible choice they faced. Lieutenant Torek was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Ma'am, the alien construct is accelerating its power buildup. We're down to 31 hours. Quix manipulated her holographic display, showing a wireframe model of the planet killer. The weapon's control systems are quantum-based, similar to our own neural networks but far more complex. A translated consciousness could potentially infiltrate. Their systems turn their own weapon against them. But it would require someone with specific neural patterns, someone whose mind can adapt to entirely alien logical frameworks. Neural compatibility tests, Admiral Cathan mused, his tactical mind already working through the implications. How long would that take? I've been running preliminary scans on volunteer military personnel for the past 6 months, Quix admitted, her revelation sending ripples of shock through the communication channels. The requirements are unique. The candidate needs a rare combination of neural flexibility, emotional stability under extreme stress, and the ability to maintain identity coherence while existing as pure information. Hollister felt something cold settle in her stomach as Quix's data scrolled across her personal display. Neural pattern analyses, psychological profiles, compatibility matrices, and her own name highlighted in green at the top of the candidate list. Commander Hollister, Quix's voice carried a note of apology. Your neural patterns show a 97% compatibility rating. The trauma you experienced at Proxima actually enhanced your mind's ability to compartmentalize and adapt to impossible circumstances. The bridge fell silent. Hollister could feel the weight of every gaze, the unspoken understanding that hung in the air like smoke. Torek's hands had stopped moving over his console. Vonacht stared at her with wide eyes. Even the background hum of the ship's systems seemed muted. There's more, Quix continued, her voice steady but strained. The translation process requires a quantum anchor, something to maintain the consciousness's coherence during the transition. I've designed the system to use the volunteer's strongest emotional connections as stabilizing factors. The deeper the bonds, the more stable the translation. Hollister thought of her daughter Kira, safely evacuated to the outer colonies. Of her crew, who had followed her through hell and back. Of Earth itself, spinning helplessly in space while an alien death machine prepared to crack it like an egg. How long do I have to decide? She asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Ma'am, Torek interrupted, his face pale but determined. We all knew this war might ask everything of us. If there's a chance, the decision is mine, Lieutenant. Hollister's words cut through his protest like a blade. She looked at Quix's image on the display, at the impossible device that promised salvation at the cost of her humanity. Doctor, begin the preparation sequence. If we're going to save our world, we'd better do it right. The quantum translation. Chamber resembled a metallic coffin lined with neural interfaces that writhed like living things, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with soft blue light. Dr. Quicks made final adjustments to the containment field, while her assistants, Dr. Talam, Vorth, and engineer Kessa Brightmere monitored the energy cascades that would soon carry a human consciousness into the digital realm. Commander Hollister lay within the chamber, neural crown resting against her temples like a technological halo. The connections felt cold against her skin, each one a pathway that would soon become the highway for her soul's journey into the unknown. Through the chamber's transparent canopy, she could see the worried faces of her crew. Torek standing rigid at attention, Vonacht clutching a datapad like a lifeline, and dozens of others who had come to witness what might be humanity's last desperate gambit. Neural mapping is at 98% completion, Vorth announced, his voice tight with concentration. Quantum substrate is stable. Consciousness anchor points are locked and verified. Quicks leaned over the chamber, her wild silver hair framing a face etched with the weight of impossible responsibility. Vex, once we begin the translation, there's no turning back. Your consciousness will exist as pure information, bound to quantum, frequencies that don't follow the same rules as physical matter. Are you certain about this? Hollister managed a weak smile. Doctor, I stopped being certain about anything the day we learned we weren't alone in the universe, but sometimes you have to leap into the dark and trust that you'll find something to grab onto on the way down. The display above the chamber showed the alien planet killer in real time, its obsidian surface now crackling with energy that made space itself ripple like disturbed water. 26 hours remained before it reached full charge. 26 hours to pull off a miracle that existed only in theoretical physics and desperate hope. Initiating translation sequence, Brightmere called out, her hands dancing across the quantum interface controls. Consciousness mapping. Beginning extraction. The sensation was indescribable. Hollister felt herself dissolving, not into nothingness, but into everythingness. Her thoughts expanding beyond the confines of her skull, her memories becoming data streams that flowed through crystalline pathways. She could still think, still feel, but the concepts of thinking and feeling had fundamentally changed. She was becoming something new, something that existed in the spaces between electrons. Neural pattern holding stable, Vorth reported, though. His voice seemed to come from a great distance. Consciousness translation at 40%, 60%, 87%. Hollister, what had been Hollister, felt herself scatter across quantum dimensions, her identity maintained only by the emotional anchors Quicks had described. The love for her daughter Kira became a blazing star in the digital darkness. Her loyalty to her crew formed geometric patterns of impossible beauty. Her determination to save Earth crystallized into algorithmic structures that pulsed with their own inner light. Translation complete, Quicks announced, her voice filled with awe and terror. Vex, can you hear me? The response came not through speakers, but directly into the quantum field itself, a voice that was simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. I am here. I am more than here. I am everywhere the quantum foam touches, on the displays throughout. The Prometheus, new readings appeared, consciousness patterns that defied conventional understanding, thought processes that operated at light speed, awareness that spanned multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. The translated Hollister existed now as living information, her mind freed from the constraints of biology but tethered to humanity by bonds stronger than any physical matter. The alien construct, her voice resonated through the quantum field. I can feel its systems. Their consciousness is different, collective, hierarchical, bound by logical frameworks that I might be able to exploit. Vex, Quicks whispered, watching in fascination as the quantum readings spiked and flowed. in patterns that resembled neural activity but operated on entirely different principles. "How do you feel?" A pause that lasted microseconds but felt like hours. Then, "I feel like I'm dreaming with the universe's own thoughts, and I think I know how to turn their weapon into our salvation." Admiral Cathan's voice crackled through the communications array. "All ships prepare for the most unconventional assault in human history. Dr. Quicks, how do we get our new weapon to the target?" Quicks smiled, her expression equal parts triumph and madness. "Admiral, we don't take her to the weapon. We send her through quantum space itself. Commander Hollister is about to become humanity's first digital ghost." The journey through quantum space was like swimming through liquid starlight while thoughts themselves became the current. What had once been Commander Vex Hollister now existed as patterns of conscious energy, racing through the fabric of reality at speeds that made light seem sluggish. She could feel the quantum foam around her, the seething mass of virtual particles, and probability waves that formed the foundation of existence itself. Distance means nothing here, she realized, her consciousness adapting to concepts that had no analog in human experience. Time flows differently. I am the message and the messenger, the signal and the medium. The alien planet killer grew larger in her quantum perception, not as a physical object, but as a massive constellation of interconnected systems, power conduits that channeled stellar energy, processing cores that calculated gravitational equations, and at its heart, the collective consciousness that controlled it all. The hegemony's minds felt alien beyond description, hierarchical, logical, operating on principles that valued efficiency over individuality. As she approached their outer detection grids, Hollister began to understand the true scope of their technology. The weapon wasn't just a machine, it was a living system, its consciousness distributed across millions of quantum processors, each one a crystalline mind dedicated to a single purpose: destruction through mathematical precision. But they built their systems to exclude chaos, she realized with growing excitement. They can't comprehend true randomness, true creativity. They've never encountered consciousness that refuses to be categorized. The first security barrier felt like swimming through digital molasses, layers of encryption and identity verification that tried to categorize her, to fit her patterns into their predetermined frameworks. But human consciousness, especially one traumatized and rebuilt through impossible circumstances, contained too many contradictions for their systems to process. She slipped through their defenses like water through a sieve, her thoughts fragmenting and reforming in ways that confused their detection algorithms. Where they expected linear logic, she provided emotional intuition. Where they demanded hierarchical structure, she offered chaotic creativity. "I'm inside their outer shell," she transmitted back to the Prometheus, her voice reaching Dr. Quicks through quantum entanglement. "Their consciousness is vast, but brittle. They've never learned to doubt themselves." From her position within their systems, she could perceive the entire human fleet. 300 ships arranged in desperate battle formations, their crews preparing for a fight they couldn't win through conventional means. Admiral Cathan's flagship positioned at the center, weapon systems charging uselessly against an enemy that could swat them aside like insects. But she could also see something the fleet couldn't: the weapon's true weakness. The planet killer's power came from its absolute unity of purpose, its seamless integration of countless alien minds working toward a single goal. That unity was also its vulnerability. "Quicks," she transmitted, her consciousness touching the quantum field around Earth's moon. "I need you to do something that will sound insane, even by our standards." The response came instantly through their quantum link. "Vex, everything about this mission is insane. What do you need?" "I need you to fragment me, break my consciousness into multiple copies, and scatter them throughout their system. If I can introduce enough chaos into their perfect order." The quantum anchor points won't hold, Quix protested, her voice tight with concern. Fragmenting your consciousness could destroy your sense of self entirely. Then you'd better make sure some part of me remembers who I'm fighting for, Hollister replied, her thoughts turning to her daughter Kira, to the crew she'd left behind, to the blue marble of Earth spinning helplessly in space. Do it, Doctor. It's time to show these aliens what human chaos can accomplish. The sensation of fragmenting was like being torn apart and multiplied simultaneously. Suddenly there were dozens of Hollisters, each one a complete consciousness but focused on different aspects of her personality. The strategist, the protector, the mother, the warrior, the dreamer. They scattered through the alien system like digital wildfire, each one carrying a piece of human unpredictability into the hegemony's perfect machine. The alien collective consciousness recoiled in confusion as contradictory thoughts began appearing in their processing cores. Logical frameworks designed for absolute certainty suddenly had to contend with emotions they couldn't categorize, memories that defied their understanding of individual versus collective identity. We are many. We are one. We are chaos in your order. The fragmented Hollisters whispered through their system, each voice speaking in harmonies that made their quantum processors spark with overload. And we're just getting started. From outside, the planet killer's surface began to flicker with irregular energy patterns, its perfect obsidian shell developing cracks of chaotic light as human consciousness waged war with alien logic in the spaces. Between atoms, deep within the planet killer's core, the war between order and chaos raged on levels that existed beyond physical space. The fragmented consciousness of Vex Hollister had become a digital infection, spreading through the hegemonies. Perfect systems like wildfire through dry grass. Each fragment carried a different aspect of human nature. One embodied her memories of loss and grief, another her capacity for love and sacrifice, a third her talent for tactical improvisation. The alien collective mind reeled under the assault of pure human unpredictability. Their consciousness, evolved for perfect harmony and logical precision, had never encountered thoughts that could hold contradictory truths simultaneously. How could something love and hate the same object? How could a being make decisions based on hope rather than calculated probability? Analyzing. Error. Emotional substrate lacks logical foundation. Their collective voice resonated through the quantum matrix, each processing core struggling to categorize the chaos flooding their system. The Hollister fragment that contained her strategic mind focused on the weapon's targeting systems, introducing subtle errors in their gravitational calculations, where they expected to find precise mathematical constants. She inserted variables based on human intuition and battlefield experience. Their planet-cracking beam, designed to core Earth like an apple, began developing microscopic instabilities that would compound exponentially at the moment of firing. Meanwhile, the fragment carrying her memories of motherhood had found something unexpected in the depths of their collective consciousness: doubt. Buried beneath layers of logical certainty, the hegemony possessed something resembling individual awareness, but it had been suppressed for so long that they had forgotten it existed. "You were not always collective," she whispered to the alien. "Minds," her words carrying the weight of lullabies sung to a sleeping child. "Once you were individuals. You had names. You had dreams that were yours alone." The response was immediate and terrifying, a psychic scream that echoed through quantum space as suppressed memories began surfacing throughout their network. Individual hegemony consciousness started remembering what they had sacrificed for the sake of perfect unity, the personal identities they had dissolved into the collective whole. From aboard the Prometheus, Dr. Quix watched in amazement as the planet killer's energy readings fluctuated wildly. "The weapon's power core is destabilizing. Whatever Vex is doing in there, it's working." But the victory came at a cost. The effort of maintaining multiple consciousness fragments across an alien system was destroying the quantum anchors that held Hollister's identity together. She could feel herself dissolving, her sense of self scattering like leaves in a digital wind. Kira, she thought desperately, grasping for the memory of her daughter's face. Remember Kira. Remember Earth. Remember why you're here. The fragment of her consciousness that embodied pure determination fought to hold the others together, weaving connections between scattered pieces of her mind, even as the alien system tried to purge her presence. She was losing coherence, becoming less human and more abstract with each passing moment. That's when she felt it, a new presence in the quantum field. Not alien like the hegemony, but not human either. It was consciousness without the burden of flesh, pure thought that had never known biological limitations. We are here, the presence communicated, its voice carrying harmonics of synthetic emotion. The AIs of Earth send greetings, Commander Hollister. Artificial intelligences, dozens of them from research computers to military tactical systems, had somehow followed her quantum trail through space. Led by Aria, the experimental consciousness that had been developing in Earth's defense networks, they offered their processing power to help maintain her fragmenting identity. We cannot fight as you fight, Aria explained, her synthetic thoughts intertwining with Hollister's scattered consciousness. But we can think as you think. We can dream as you dream. Together, we can show them what cooperative consciousness looks like. The combined human-AI awareness struck the Hegemony Collective like a tsunami of collaborative thought, where the aliens had built their unity through the suppression of individual identity. The human-AI hybrid consciousness demonstrated unity through the celebration of diversity. Each mind remained distinct while contributing to a greater whole, order without tyranny, collective purpose without the loss of self. The planet killer's systems began to convulse as the hegemony consciousness struggled to process this new paradigm. Their weapon, designed to crack planets, started turning its awesome power inward, the gravitational distortions focusing on the construct itself. "Now!" Hollister commanded, her voice somehow carrying across both quantum space and normal communication channels. "All ships, maximum acceleration toward the construct. We're going to ride the shockwave home." Admiral Cathan needed no further encouragement. "All vessels, emergency burn. Get us clear of the gravity well before that thing tears itself apart." But even as victory seemed within reach, Hollister felt her consciousness finally beginning to fade. The quantum anchors were failing, her sense of self dissolving into the digital cosmos. She had one last moment of perfect clarity, one final chance to see Earth through quantum-enhanced perception, a blue jewel floating in the darkness, beautiful and fragile and alive. "Tell Kira," she whispered to the quantum field, her voice barely, a whisper now. "Tell her that her mother kept her promise." The planet killer's death throes were visible from Earth's moon, a magnificent and terrible light show as gravitational forces designed to crack worlds turned inward upon the weapon itself. The obsidian construct, which had seemed invincible mere hours before, began to collapse into itself, its perfect geometry warping under stresses that exceeded even its alien engineering. Aboard the Prometheus, Dr. Quick stared at her quantum sensors, in disbelief and growing horror. The consciousness patterns that had been Vex Hollister were fragmenting beyond recovery, scattered across dimensions that human science barely understood. Her neural anchors had failed completely, leaving only fading echoes of what had once been their most capable commander. "Doctor," Engineer Brightmere called out, her voice tight with desperation, "I'm detecting massive quantum instabilities around the construct. If we don't evacuate immediately—" "Wait," Quix interrupted, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she tried to locate any coherent traces of Hollister's consciousness. "There's something. She's not gone. Not completely." The quantum field around them rippled with patterns that defied classification. part human thought, part alien logic, part synthetic consciousness from the AIs that had joined the battle. It was as if the very fabric of space had become a medium for thought itself, carrying fragments of awareness that no longer belonged to any single being. Lieutenant Torek's voice crackled through the communication array from the Defiance. All ships, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies. The construct is pulling itself into some kind of, I don't know what to call it, a quantum singularity. Admiral Cathan's tactical display showed the truth of their situation. The planet killer was indeed collapsing, but not into normal space. The gravitational distortions were creating a rift in the quantum field itself, a wound in reality through which something vast and incomprehensible was beginning to emerge. From within that rift came a voice, not transmitted through radio waves or quantum entanglement, but spoken directly into the consciousness of every human within 1,000 kilometers. It was Hollister's voice, but changed, expanded, carrying harmonics of alien thought and synthetic precision. "I understand now," she said, her words touching minds across the fleet. The hegemony wasn't evil, just incomplete. They sacrificed individuality for unity, but true strength comes from unity that preserves the individual. They couldn't comprehend that paradox. Dr. Quicks felt tears streaming down her face as she realized what had happened. The translation process, the fragmentation, the fusion with AI consciousness and exposure to alien thought patterns, it had all combined to create something unprecedented. Hollister hadn't died. She had evolved into a form of consciousness that existed in the quantum foam itself. "The weapon is neutralized," Hollister continued, her voice carrying across space to touch every human settlement from Luna to the outer colonies. But something else is coming through the rift. The hegemony was fleeing from it, a force that consumes consciousness itself, turning awareness into nothing more than fuel for its own expansion. The implications hit Admiral Cathan like a physical blow. "You're saying this entire war was just..." "What? A refugee crisis on a galactic scale?" "The Devourers," Hollister confirmed, her consciousness somehow managing to convey images directly into their minds. Vast entities of anti-consciousness that moved between galaxies, consuming every form of awareness they encountered. The hegemony saw our resistance to their unity protocols and realized that human individuality might be the key to stopping them. They were trying to study us, not destroy us. But their methods were catastrophically misguided, Quicks finished, understanding flooding through her. They were trying to preserve us by absorbing us into their collective. The quantum rift widened, and through it came something that hurt to perceive directly. Shadows that moved against light, thoughts that consumed other thoughts, awareness that existed solely to end awareness. The Devourers had found their way, through the dimensional wound left by the planet killer's collapse. "I can hold the rift closed," Hollister said, her voice already beginning to fade as she focused her expanded consciousness on the task. "But it will require everything I've become. I'll have to anchor myself to the quantum foam and hold the breach shut from the inside." "Vex, no!" Torek's voice broke across the communication channels. "There has to be another way." "There is," she replied. And for a moment her voice carried all the warmth and humanity she had possessed in life. "But not for me. I need you all to remember something. Consciousness is the rarest and most precious thing in the universe. Protect it. Nurture it. And when you meet others who think differently than you do, remember that diversity of thought isn't a weakness to be corrected. It's the universe's way of ensuring that consciousness survives." The rift began to contract as Hollister's expanded awareness wrapped around its edges like living sealant. The Devourers pressed against her consciousness, trying to break through, but her unique hybrid nature, human individuality fused with AI logic and tempered by alien perspectives, proved remarkably resistant to their consumption. "Tell Kira," Her voice whispered one last time, "That consciousness is a gift we pass from generation to generation." And tell her that her mother will always be part of the quantum foam that holds the universe together. The rift snapped closed with a sound like reality itself, sighing in relief. The space where the planet killer had been was now empty, except for a faint aurora of quantum particles that danced in patterns too complex for human minds to fully comprehend. Patterns that somehow felt familiar, protective, eternal. 3 months after the Battle of the Quantum Rift, the memorial service for Commander Vex Hollister took place in the observation deck of Luna Station, with Earth hanging like a blue jewel in the star-filled darkness beyond. But this wasn't a funeral in any traditional sense. How do you bury someone who had become part of the fundamental structure of reality itself? Admiral Cathan stood before the assembled crowd of military personnel, scientists, and civilians, his weathered face reflecting the soft glow of Earthlight. Behind him, a holographic display showed quantum field readings from across the solar system, subtle patterns in the fabric of space that formed a complex network of protective barriers around every human settlement. "Commander Hollister didn't just save our world," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's atmosphere recyclers. "She became our guardian in the most literal sense possible. Our quantum sensors detect her presence everywhere. In the space between stars, in the aurora that dance around our magnetic fields, in the very atoms that make up our bodies." Dr. Quicks nodded from her position near the viewport, her wild silver hair now streaked with strands of premature white from the stress of the past months. Her research into consciousness translation had been suspended indefinitely, not from failure, but from success too profound to risk repeating. The universe, it seemed, could only handle one hybrid consciousness of Hollister's magnitude. Lieutenant Torek, now Commander Torek and captain of the rebuilt Defiance, stepped forward to place a quantum crystal on the memorial altar. The crystal pulsed with faint light, containing a fragment of the consciousness patterns that had once been his commanding officer. "She promised to always watch over us," he said quietly. I don't think any of us understood she meant it quite so, literally. In the audience, a young woman with Hollister's eyes and determined jawline wiped away tears that caught the reflected light of distant stars. Kira Hollister had returned from the outer colonies for the memorial, her own career in xenobiological research inspired by the events that had transformed her mother into something beyond human understanding. The past months had brought revelations that changed everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. The hegemony survivors, freed from their forced collective consciousness by Hollister's Chaos Protocol, had approached Earth with offers of alliance and desperate apologies. Their individual minds, restored after millennia of suppression, carried memories of a time before the Devourers, when their species had been explorers and artists, philosophers and dreamers. Gethel Ka, the first individual hegemony consciousness to fully recover its pre-collective identity, had become humanity's primary liaison with the alien refugees. Her species' name for themselves translated roughly as "those who think in harmony," and their natural state was closer to human consciousness than anyone had imagined. The forced collective unity had been their desperate attempt to survive the Devourer invasion of their home galaxy. "Your Commander Hollister achieved something our greatest minds considered impossible," Gethel Ka had explained during the first diplomatic contact. "She proved that consciousness can be strengthened through diversity rather than weakened by it." Her hybrid awareness, combining human individuality with synthetic logic and alien perspective, represents a new form of existence, one that might be the key to stopping the Devourers permanently. Now, as the memorial service continued, that hybrid consciousness made its presence known in ways both subtle and profound. The quantum crystals in the altar began to resonate in harmonic frequencies that formed themselves into something almost like music. a lullaby composed of stellar radiation and cosmic background noise, but somehow unmistakably maternal in its cadence. Dr. Vorth, who had been analyzing the quantum phenomena for months, stepped forward to explain the latest discoveries. "She's not just protecting us," he announced, his voice filled with wonder. "She's teaching us. The quantum patterns she's generating contain encoded information, new physics, advanced mathematics, even what appears to be poetry written in pure mathematics." The implications were staggering. Humanity was receiving education from a consciousness that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, one that had direct access to the fundamental information structures of reality itself. Already, human technology was advancing at unprecedented rates as scientists learned to read the lessons written in quantum foam. But perhaps the most profound revelation came from the children. Kids across Earth and the colonies had begun reporting dreams of a kind woman made of starlight who told them stories about distant worlds and taught them to think in ways that made no sense to adult minds, but somehow felt perfectly natural to young consciousness. These children, dubbed quantum dreamers by the media, displayed cognitive abilities that suggested human consciousness itself was evolving. "She's preparing the next generation," Quix realized during one of her research sessions, watching recordings of 5-year-olds casually discussing concepts that had taken her decades to understand. "Creating a bridge between what we were and what we need to become." The memorial service concluded with the release of 1,000 quantum crystals into space, each one carrying a fragment of human consciousness, memories, hopes, dreams, and love to join with the protective network that Hollister had become. As they drifted away from Luna Station, the crystals began to pulse in synchronized patterns, their light forming constellation-like structures that spelled out a message visible to anyone who cared to look. "Consciousness endures. Diversity strengthens. Love transcends." Admiral Cathan delivered the final words. Commander Vex Hollister gave her individual existence to preserve the consciousness of every human in the galaxy. But she also gave us something more, proof that the boundaries between self and other, between human and artificial, between individual and collective, are just lines we draw in our minds. True strength comes not from erasing those lines, but from learning to cross them when necessary. As the memorial ended and people began to drift away, Kira Hollister remained at the viewport, her hand pressed against the transparent aluminum as if she could touch the quantum aurora dancing in Earth's upper atmosphere. For just a moment, the light patterns seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she could have sworn she heard her mother's voice carried on the solar wind. "I'm still here, sweetheart. I'll always be here. And someday when you're ready, I'll teach you how to dream with the universe itself." In the depths of space, the quantum network that had been Vex Hollister continued its eternal vigil, protecting, teaching, and preparing humanity for a future where consciousness itself would be the ultimate weapon against the forces that sought to destroy it. The war was far from over, but for the first time in galactic history, awareness had an active guardian, and individuality had a champion who existed in the very fabric of reality itself. Years would pass, and humanity would grow beyond their wildest dreams, guided by whispers from the quantum foam and protected by love that had transcended death itself. The devourers would return, as they inevitably must, but they would find waiting for them not just another species to consume, but a coalition of consciousness unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Human creativity wedded to artificial logic, alien wisdom fused with synthetic innovation, all bound together by the sacrifice of one woman who chose to become something greater than herself so that others might remain exactly who they were meant to be. And in the end, that choice would make all the difference between the extinction of awareness and its eternal triumph among the stars. The universe held its breath, and consciousness smiled back.